train the people only to consume. Step 2, infiltrate adults with the news. Step 3, indoctrinate the children through the schools and the music and the apps on the phones that they use. Step 4, separate the right from the left. Step 5, separate the white from the black. Step 6, separate the rich from the poor. Use religion and equality to separate them more. Step 7, fabricate a problem made a lie. Step 8, put it on the news every night. Step 9, when people start to fight and divide, take control. This is called situational design.
We encounter hundreds of symbols in corporate logos, music, the media we watch, and the products we consume. Some are harmless, but others subtly influence our behavior without us realizing it. Our brains process symbols faster than words. Our subconscious absorbs them, forming a language that can be exploited. Immersion in these symbols changes how we think and act. In the world of the elite, symbols are more than just artistic expression. They are a secret language. Celebrities aren't just entertainers. They're key players in a hidden global structure controlled by the Illuminati. A sold-out stadium.
Thank y'all so much.
A song ends. The crowd erupts as a performer raises their hands, forming a triangle in front of their face. But some of us see something more than just the gesture. It's a signal of loyalty and obedience, a promise that whatever deal they made, they're holding up their end. Those who hold the triangle in front of their face, especially their eye, that's the signal that they're keeping watch over their audience. They're not just influencing their fans, they're monitoring them. And when they show the triangle, that's an acknowledgement that they're in the hierarchy, on one of the steps of the pyramid. But the Illuminati has plenty of eyes on us who aren't yet in the pyramid, but they watch us all the same. The signal for these initiates is covering one eye. If they remain loyal and do their duty, they too can join the pyramid. In addition to the watchers, there are the disruptors. Spot them with this sign. The index finger and pinky raised with the middle and ring fingers folded down. Basically, the rock-on gesture, also known as the goat. This symbol represents the Baphomet. It signifies rebellion against the established order and devotion to Illuminati's global control. Next are the prospects. They use the OK gesture, where the index finger and thumb form a circle while the other three fingers are extended. This represents the number 666. This sign is often used by those within the entertainment industry to communicate that they're willing to use their wealth and power to be part of the Illuminati's agenda of control. Finally, there's this one, hands down folded into a diamond shape. You'll see this in formal settings, like public ceremonies or award shows. It indicates senior status and high rank in the Illuminati power structure. You'll mostly see this displayed by political and business leaders. These symbols not only signal allegiance to the Illuminati, but also condition the public, quietly preparing society for the New World Order. And every time you see these symbols, you're witnessing a hidden conversation, a dialogue between those who control the world and those who aspire to. You're watching generals give orders to soldiers, and soldiers acknowledging those orders. They're telling us everything they're doing. We just have to learn to read the signs.
Grand Master of the Knights Templar.
And they have a lot of secrets, which only fuel speculation. Both groups do perform rituals and use symbols, that's true. But there's no obvious connection to them in what we'd call the present-day Illuminati. That's not to say a secret government doesn't exist. You know, I believe it does. I don't think it's necessarily a group of occultists or Satan worshippers.
Yeah, they're still evil, though.
Well, go watch our Project Bluebeam video. I make some allegations against globalist groups like the WEF, CFR, Club of Rome, and the Trilateral Commission. In that episode, I describe what they're trying to do. At least what I think they're trying to do. You decide for yourself if you think they're evil.
Yeah, definitely evil.
So I can't fully debunk all the claims about Illuminati symbolism. But I do think a lot of it is urban legend, coincidence, and our tendency to make connections that aren't there. I don't think there's a group called the Illuminati. But I do think there's a group of elites working together, acting like the Illuminati.
Rose Gates, Bush, Brzezinski, Cheney, Obama, Epstein.
Those names you need to remember are James Angleton, Howard Hunt, William Harvey, Ed Lansdale, Frank Sturgis, David Morales, Alan Dulles, Richard Bessel, the Bush family, Dick Davidson family, Rockefellers, Richard Nixon, Avril Harriman, Neil Mallon, William Casey.
The best way to cause all people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. And boy, that just clicked with me, and I knew that that this is just another scam. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. Age of deception, 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 age of deception.
They're still working on it, though.
Well, if they are, they'd be breaking the law.
Oh, my mistake, of course. The CIA would never break the law.
Faking an alien invasion, even without holographic technology, could be done. All you need is a story and a compliant media to push it.
UFO sightings are a national security threat.
The things that they came up against were potentially so advanced that they posed an existential threat to the United States.
Well, we already have that.
We do, and that's too bad. The Founding Fathers gave the press special protections to watch politicians. Instead, the press gives special protections to the politicians so they can watch us. That's dangerous because the United States has a dark history of false flag operations. Remember Operation Gladio?
Link right down in your honeypot.
The CIA and Mafia teamed up and armed Italian terrorists to kill civilians and blame the communists. Or Operation Northwoods in 1962. The Defense Department planned to attack Americans and blame Cuban terrorists. Then they'd invade Cuba, and thank goodness JFK said no. He stopped trusting the military intelligence state after the Bay of Pigs.
Hey, and how'd that work out for him?
Not well. JFK didn't want war, so he was replaced by a president who did, Lyndon Johnson, who presided over the Gulf of Tonkin incident, a false flag operation where the U.S. Navy claimed it was under attack by North Vietnam. Now, this is still controversial to say, but I don't care. It's the truth. The U.S. government lied to drag us into the senseless Vietnam War.
What I want is somebody that can lay up some plans to trap these guys and whoop hell out of them. Kill some of them. That's what I want to do.
Well, I'll try and bring something back. We'll meet that objective.
One telegram, which we later found from Commander Herrick of the Maddox, had been made available to the committee at that time. I'm quite sure they would have had long hearings, gone into it thoroughly, and if they'd been able to discover the facts as they actually were, I don't believe it passed resolution because it was based upon absolutely false, erroneous information.
50,000 Americans dead, 300,000 wounded for what? To enrich weapons manufacturers and chemical companies? Really? But that's the theme of this episode. To achieve their goals, whatever they are, the power structure has to deceive us. Okay, back to the UFOs, the whistleblowers. I take a lot of heat for openly saying I don't trust them. Everything they say is approved by the Pentagon. That doesn't mean what they say is true. It means the Pentagon wanted them to say it. That's a great opportunity for deception. David Grush heard from a guy who knew a guy who worked with another guy who said he saw UFO wreckage. What?
Dave then went to the Defense Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, the DOPSA office inside the Pentagon, and he asked for permission to talk about what he knows, or what he says he knows. And they've given him permission to talk about crash retrievals.
Did we learn anything from any of that? Luis Elizondo was in charge of ATIP, but the Pentagon said he wasn't. Then he said they're smearing him. Then they said, well, he worked as a contractor, but not ATIP, and on and on and on. Which side is telling the truth? We don't know, but one side is using deception. Elizondo said he resigned because he was frustrated with the government's lack of transparency about UFOs. Great. That's what we need, that kind of bravery. Okay, tell us what's going on. What'd you see? What do we have? Well, he said, well, I have to be careful about what I say.
So they made it very clear to me that I have to be very careful not to talk about something that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Oh. But there are more details in my book.
Whatever's in there is cleared.
Oh. Look, I want to believe these guys. But as they say, I've been hurt before. Air Force intelligence, where both men spent many years, specializes in deception.
We started slowly convincing him, or not really convincing him, but just giving him the idea that this might be just UFOs, extraterrestrials. And he ran with that.
I have to be careful. Is it possible? And I'll be very careful what I say.
Hey, I just tapped into a secret laser on Kirtland Air Force Base. Obviously, we can't have that happen. So all I had to do was say, well, you know what, Paul? Maybe what you did see was UFOs.
There's a place near Culpeper, Virginia called The Farm, and people are go there to be trained, to be professional disinformation, basically how to lie well.
There's techniques that we use, that we're trained to use in gaining that person's confidence. And I used those techniques against Bill Miller and agreeing to say things that we wanted said regarding the UFO community or within the UFO community.
When you see people on CNN or CBS 60 Minutes, the folks that they will allow to talk about it are people that have been cherry-picked by this cabal, this secret government group, to say what they're told to say. It's scripted.
I want to be careful that I don't, because again, I haven't had what I have approval to talk about. I gotta be careful. I don't want to. Yeah, and again, I got to be careful because some of that stuff I haven't been cleared to talk about.
Do you have any examples of this? Yes, of course. Nick Pope, Lou Elizondo, Chris Mellon, all those guys.
Okay. Again, I got to be careful exactly what I say, but
they have been, I know for a fact, been told what to say.
I'm still advising the U.S. government on this.
You still consult with the government. You still have a security clearance. So,
and I'm trying to carefully message this, and on occasion, I still will consult for the U.S. government, for the U.S. government, for the U.S. government, for the U.S. government, for the U.S. government.
If it's not true. But remember, Serge Manasse said that's all part of the plan, to convince us through deception that UFOs are a threat. So is Project Bluebeam happening? Well, Serge Manasse's story is complicated. The government did harass him, arrest him for misinformation, and he died the next day. It sounds like a conspiracy. But he loved Star Trek, and he called Project Bluebeam Star Trek technology. And Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, released the plot of an unreleased movie called The God Thing. It was eventually used for a Next Generation episode called Devil's Due. An alien uses technology to pose as a god and enslave a planet. She even uses mind control and holograms.
Oh, no. When did this guy release his book?
About 18 months after that episode aired.
Oh.
Right. Project Bluebeam sounds like science fiction because it probably was. But that doesn't mean there's nothing to the story. The world the elites want to create is exactly how Project Bluebeam describes. And it's already happening. They're already merging economies, cultures, and governments. That's globalism. The Council on Foreign Relations, Bilderberg Group, Trilateral Commission, WEF, Davos. These are globalists, and they're not looking out for us.
Illuminati Volume 1 link down in the click hole.
Globalism, if done right, could help poor countries benefit from wealthier ones. There could be better cooperation, easier trade, cultural exchange, fewer wars. Sounds good. But their vision is more like Serge Manasse's prediction. Centrally planned government, a single currency, controlled wages and prices, assigned jobs, no private property, and depopulation. They downplay their more extreme plans. Deception. And the rules they want to impose on us to implement their vision, well, those rules don't apply to them. They want us to drive electric cars and take public transportation. They fly on private jets and are driven around by a fleet of Range Rovers. They want to install devices in our homes to limit the energy we use for heating and cooling, but keep their 5 houses at perfect temperature year-round. They want us to eat a plant-based diet.
And bugs.
And bugs, they really do.
How can we grow nutritious and sustainable food that supports healthy and productive lives with far fewer resources available? Insects are among the most abundant and nutritious animals on the planet.
But when these people get together, they go through a lot of steak and lobster. Greenpeace says that Davos is a distasteful masterclass in hypocrisy. And people often call out this hypocrisy. But here's what everyone misses. They don't see themselves as hypocrites. They need more resources because they're more important than us. They can't spend all day at an airport waiting in security lines and dragging bags and dealing with flight delays. They're so busy saving the world, they have to be exempt from the rules. And most of these elites aren't evil people.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure about that.
Really, most are not. They want a cleaner, safer, and better world for everyone. They want to feed starving children. They want older people to live in dignity. They don't want anyone to live in poverty. Noble goals. Their solution? A rental-based economy for housing, food, and everything.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
Right. Ida Auken said at the World Economic Forum in 2016, the state would own all resources, and we just subscribe to them. Sharing and limiting access to resources would cut waste and pollution.
You want the function, you want the service, right? Why do you want to own a cell phone if you can just lease it? And if you lease, why shouldn't you lease your refrigerator or your washing machine or your dishwasher, or why do you want to own it?
And you don't want to own a home.
Secure a mortgage, buy a ton of furniture, and spend long hours on upkeep and renovation once in a while. Why make all these commitments? Life is full of surprises.
Renting gives you more freedom and less responsibility. And if the state controls resources, they'd be shared more fairly. They would limit access for some people in order to give access to others.
From each according to his ability, to each according to his needs.
Exactly. Karl Marx said that. That resource rental economy idea is just another flavor of communism. But they present it as this grand plan that would make everyone's lives better. Their presentation is deception. We know what would happen. We'd have to contribute our private property, but the elites wouldn't. They're too important. They're doing this for the greater good. That's not evil. That's just arrogance. Project Bluebeam is a warning. Don't be deceived into accepting globalism. The WEF has backed away from the own nothing and be happy idea, but only after they were called out on it. They liked it before. That's deception. To accept their vision for a new world, existing institutions like religion, family, and patriotism need to be completely dismantled. Most of us don't want this, so the message has to be delivered as a subtle deception. Like maybe you can slip it into pop culture.
Let the past die.
I've read humanity's story, so now I'm erasing them.
I will shred this universe down to its last atom, and then create a new one.
Let the old ways serve us no longer.
The past is dead. We either move forward or we die with it.
Kill it, if you have to.
Karl Marx said that the old ways have to be torn down, and the only way to do it is by force. That's the only way.
There is only one way in which the murderous death agonies of the old society and the bloody birth throes of the new society can be shortened, simplified, and concentrated. And that way is revolutionary terror.
And look, this episode has nothing to do with politics. It's about the powerful using deception to take advantage of the powerless. You can be a communist, or a socialist, or a capitalist. I'm a little bit of all those, but most of all, I'm a realist. Believe whatever you want. Just be honest about it. All systems are flawed because we are flawed. When ideologues claim their system is fair, they're lying. Communism isn't fair, but neither is capitalism. Socialism isn't fair, and the free markets aren't fair. No fair system exists because some people will always take advantage and will always want more. They know this, so they deceive us. Project Bluebeam may never happen, but the tools to control perception are here and being used against us every day. So what can you do? Well, get your information from as many sources as you can, but know they all have an agenda and use subtle deceptions to manipulate you. When you hear kill the past or unburdened by what has been, that's Marx talking, but they won't admit it. It's deception, and I want you to recognize it. Once you learn all the subtle ways the powerful use deception, you'll be changed forever. The world goes from black and white to color. You can't ever be deceived again. And when you learn, teach the skill to your kids, to everyone you can. That's the only way to stop Project Bluebeam and every other plan that requires us to surrender our freedom to the powerful. More regular people, like you and me, have to recognize when we're being deceived and say no. Whether it's the media, politicians, or a giant god in the sky, more of us need to see the power structure for what it really is, an illusion. Can humans be controlled subliminally? The answer, of course, is a big yes. And you won't be surprised to know that advertisers were the first to jump on this new technology.
For your convenience, we have an attractive refreshment stand in the lobby with buttered popcorn, cold and good and hot from Thunder, your favorite candies, wholesome and rich with a flavor treat for every taste, ice cream and other good things to eat.
For 6 weeks in 1957, families in New Jersey went to the movies, had a fun night out, and went home. Totally normal. They had no idea they were exposed to what was later called a startling kind of invisible advertising. A mechanism had been attached to the film projector. It flashed messages on the screen every 5 seconds. Each message only appeared for 1/3000th of a second, too fast to be seen by the human eye. But that was the point. The goal was to have these messages bypass the conscious brain and register directly in the subconscious. 1,400 times over the course of 2 hours, the audience saw, well, their subconscious mind saw, calls to action like eat more popcorn. Over 45,000 movie patrons were exposed without their consent or knowledge, and popcorn sales jumped 58%. Ad agencies went into overdrive, and new companies were launched in the subliminal space. Radio stations WAAF in Chicago and WCCO in Minneapolis tested subliminal ads to see if they increased sales. They did. American television networks implemented the technology into their broadcasts. It worked. What are you doing?
What? Me? Nothing.
Whispering raise is not going to make me give you a raise.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But when the public learned that they were being manipulated without their knowledge or consent, there was a huge backlash. The Hollywood Reporter called it an obscene violation. The LA Times and Washington Post flat out called it brainwashing. Within a year, theaters, radio, and television broadcasters banned subliminal advertising. Now, of course, banning flashing images wouldn't stop consumers from being unconsciously manipulated. No one realized it was already happening, and it was very successful. The CIA launched Operation PB Success in 1954. They funded and trained a rebel paramilitary force. On June 18th, the Liberation Army seized control of the government, forcing Arbenz into exile. Carlos Castillo Armas was installed as a U.S.-backed military dictator, the first of many.
Se irá a fusilar a quien esté en contra de la ley.
Turmoil in Central America. First there was Nicaragua, then El Salvador, now comes Guatemala.
For 40 years, Guatemala suffered brutality, terror, death squads, and political instability. The human rights violations during this time are so graphic, I can't tell you what they are. And whatever you're guessing, it's worse. 93% of these crimes were committed by CIA-trained operatives. 200,000 dead, another 200,000 fled. 1 million people lost their homes. But the United Fruit Company's profits were safe, thanks to America's master of propaganda.
An interesting little insight into this covert action. One, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Henry Cabot Lodge, had personal stock holdings in United Fruit Company. The Assistant Secretary of State, John Lodge, had personal stock holdings in United Fruit Company. The Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles, his law firm did legal work for, I believe it's the Schlafly Bank, which held the papers on the Guatemalan Railroad, which was owned by the United Fruit Company. And the CIA director, Alan Dulles, was his brother, also was a member of the same law firm with this indirect financial interest in United Fruit Company. Arbenz was not a communist, and there was not a single communist in his cabinet.
Bernays proved you could subconsciously control a person's opinion. But the U.S. military intelligence apparatus wanted more. They wanted to subconsciously control a person's actions. The subliminal was about to become weaponized. Psychological operations, or PSYOPs, are a standard part of U.S. military operations. The Army Field Manual even calls them vital. The term PSYOPs sounds mysterious, but the tactics are usually nothing more than distributing leaflets or broadcasting propaganda over the radio. The goal is to influence enemy behavior using information instead of bullets and bombs. In the thick of the Vietnam War, with American casualties mounting, leaflets weren't going to cut it. But the Army had a powerful new tool that could directly target enemy troops: the Squawk Box. The Squawk Box was a sonic weapon that used specially designed speakers mounted on armored vehicles and helicopters. The human ear can suffer damage from sound over 85 decibels. The Squawk Box could deliver a devastating shriek at 120 decibels from 2.5 miles away. Viet Cong soldiers were instantly incapacitated by the intense sound. They suffered pain, nausea, and often permanent hearing loss. But the Squawk Box could do more than inflict physical harm. The Army discovered that sound waves could manipulate emotions, inducing distress and confusion in the enemy. The results were staggering. Between 1967 and 1968, an estimated 30,000 Viet Cong surrendered to U.S. forces. Despite its success, the Squawk Box had a critical flaw. The enemy could hear it coming, literally. The Army wanted a more deadly and discreet weapon, something the enemy couldn't see or hear. Sound waves couldn't do it, but electromagnetic waves, they absolutely could. In 1961, microwave technology was becoming part of daily life. Microwave ovens had just hit the market, and low levels of microwaves were used in lots of different devices. Biophysicist Alan Frey began studying microwave effects on humans to make sure there were no health risks. He placed subjects in a shielded room and exposed them to different microwave frequencies. At 1310 megahertz, something strange happened. A subject asked about a clicking sound, but the room was silent. It was shielded from the outside, and there were no moving parts involved in this experiment. Frey discovered that frequencies between 200 and 3000 megahertz caused people to hear sounds that seemed to come from inside their heads. Clicks, knocks, buzzes, and chirps. He could beam sounds directly into the brain without implants. Scientists started using this to train animals, making cats change direction with just microwave pulses.
Oh, I'd like to make cats change direction right into oncoming traffic.
Stop that.
Well, you better tell your demon fur babies to keep their filthy mitts out of my bowl.
Okay, settle down. The CIA wondered, could this technology affect an animal's heart rate? More specifically, could they induce a heart attack remotely? Frey experimented with frog hearts and pulse-modulated radiation. He was actually disturbed to find he could increase a frog's heart rate with no device attached. He did it remotely. Soviet scientists had similar results with rabbits. By 1972, the Soviets moved to human trials. A declassified report revealed they had done over 500 studies on how microwaves affect human behavior. Both lethal and non-lethal effects were found. The mention of lethal effects was a horrifying new detail. They didn't mean to kill their subjects, but they discovered they could. And those that survived exposure could be remotely controlled. The U.S. Army loved it. They immediately ramped up research on microwave radiation. They ordered trucks capable of carrying microwave broadcasting equipment. The goal was to irradiate and immobilize the enemy. In 1976, the Navy finally discovered how Soviet scientists were accidentally killing people. They were using microwaves powerful enough to generate heat. Soviet scientists called it microthermal effects. If you own a microwave oven, you call this microthermal effect cooking.
The Russians cooked people?
Yep.
I bet you taste like chicken.
That's gross.
Oh. Eating human is gross, but eating fish is okay? See what happens when your shoe's on the other fin?
Fair enough.
Nah.
J.F. Shapitz was a trusted Black Ops scientist who worked for the Department of Defense. He tried broadcasting commands into a subject's mind. It worked. Using low-power microwaves, he could make subjects hear words inside their own heads. The military told Chapitz to go further. They wanted to send commands to a person's subconscious without them hearing the command. In a second round of experiments, one subject was bombarded with microwave radiation. Then something odd happened. He got up from his chair and left. He actually left the lab. Now, this was allowed. The subjects weren't prisoners, but this had never happened before. A little while later, the guy returned with a can of soda. Chapitz asked him why he left in the middle of the experiment. The man said he was thirsty, so he went to the store for a cold drink. Chapitz smiled. The experiment worked. This subject had been programmed to feel thirsty and to go to the store for a soda. It was hypnosis using microwaves. But hypnosis doesn't work on everyone. The military needed a sure thing. And 4 years later, that's exactly what they got. Eldon Bird, working for the DoD, was exploring frequencies much shorter than microwaves. He wanted to weaponize human brainwaves. Brainwaves, also known as neural oscillations, are patterns of electrical activity in the brain. These waves have different frequencies that correspond to different mental states. Beta waves for active problem solving, alpha waves for relaxation, and so on. Dr. Bird tried synchronizing external electromagnetic waves with brainwaves. He believed he could influence specific thoughts and emotions by matching the frequency and ramping up the power. It worked. He discovered he could sync with an animal's brainwaves and trigger the release of behavior-regulating chemicals.
We could put animals into a stupor. We got chick brains to dump 80% of the natural opioids in their brains. We got rats to release histamine.
Histamine is released in response to allergens, dust, pollen, mites. Histamine also causes a cascade of inflammatory reactions. Bird was thrilled.
In humans, this would cause instant flu-like symptoms and produce nausea. You would disable a person temporarily. It would have been like a stun gun.
Bird used the phrase "would have been" because his project was shut down after 2 years, despite being approved for 4. He was onto something groundbreaking. He suspected the program wasn't shut down. He believed it was moved to Black Ops, and he was right. In 1982, a U.S. Air Force report contained an ominous warning.
Understanding the brain as an electrically mediated organ suggests that impressed electromagnetic fields are capable of directing behavior. Further, the passage of 100 milliamperes through the myocardium can lead to cardiac standstill and death.
The U.S. Air Force was secretly continuing Bird's brainwave research. They hired Dr. Ross 80 to weaponize it. 80 began by implanting transmitters into animal brains. These devices didn't receive information, the implants sent out information. 80 compiled a library of frequencies and their corresponding mental and physical states. Then he turned the animals' brainwaves against them. By broadcasting certain frequencies back into their brains, he could manipulate their behavior and their emotions at will. Eventually, he refined the technique to work without implants. It was time to test the technology on the human brain. He placed the subject's head in an active electromagnetic field and tuned it to a specific frequency depending on the result he wanted. In one experiment, he turned the machine to induce theta waves. Our brains produce theta waves as we're falling asleep. The subject of the experiment fell asleep. The technology for a revolutionary new weapon was born. Now, it was time to build it. A device that can manipulate a person's thoughts and emotions sounds like science fiction. At best, it sounds like pseudoscience. But not only does such a device exist, but it's been patented, although the full schematics are classified by the U.S. government. Patent number 5159703, issued to Silent Sounds Incorporated, describes something called a silent subliminal presentation system. The device maps electrical brain activity corresponding to specific emotions. These emotional signal clusters are identified and logged to create a database of emotions. Human brainwaves are then cloned and enhanced. You select a desired emotion, fear, despair, hopelessness, and the system can transmit it. The emotional triggers are carried by the silent sound spread spectrum, or SQUAD, a subliminal carrier technology that operates at either very low or very high frequencies. The key is that it's inaudible. And what makes this system more practical and more dangerous is that SQUAD can be transmitted using a carrier frequency like ordinary radio or television.
What you talking about, Willis?
Okay, let's say you want someone to feel sad. You grab the brainwave frequency for sadness from your database. Then you layer that inaudible sound wave on top of an audible sound wave, like an FM radio wave. So the target hears the radio broadcast, but doesn't realize a second wave hitched a ride. That second wave syncs with the target's brain, triggering sadness, or whatever emotion you want. According to the patent, the resulting emotion is overwhelming. Now, the patent insists that this is not a weapon, but it does note the waves are subliminal and undetectable. That makes them dangerous. Silent Sounds Inc. claims to focus solely on positive emotions. But in 1996, the president of Silent Sounds couldn't stop himself from bragging about the device's true purpose.
While the schematics are classified by the U.S. government, we are allowed to say we work with governments around the world. The Germans, even former Soviet Union countries.
And then he let the big one slip.
The system was used throughout Operation Desert Storm quite successfully.
The U.S. military had achieved subliminal mind control and deployed the technology in Iraq, and many Iraqi troops died trying to stop it. In 1991, Saddam Hussein occupied Kuwait with a huge army, nearly 500,000 soldiers. It was the fifth largest military in the world, and they were battle-tested from 8 years of war with Iran. So it sounded like wishful thinking when the Bush administration said they wanted Iraqi troops to simply lay down their arms and go home. Huh? Why would they do that? Because the U.S. military had a new secret weapon. A radio station in the small town of Khafji. If you tuned into the station, you'd hear music or news like any radio station. But embedded in the radio transmission was a signal that mimics a brainwave frequency. Specifically, the frequency that creates the feeling of hopelessness. And it worked. Entire battalions laid down their arms. Iraqi tanks flew white flags. They simply lost the will to fight. American troops rolled into Kuwait heavily armed and ready for battle. Iraqi troops were waiting patiently, thousands of them. One Marine said they were surrendering so fast they could hardly keep up. The war seemed to be coming to an end. That's why it was a surprise to the Marines in Khafji when around 8 p.m. on January 29th, Iraq's 5th Mechanized Division attacked and took the town. This was a much-needed propaganda victory for Iraq, but it didn't last.
I would tell you I don't think that battle is over by a long shot. I expect a lot more fighting will probably occur tonight.
2 days later, American air power overwhelmed Khafji, and the 5th Mechanized Division was completely wiped out. But they destroyed the transmitter that was subliminally making Iraqi troops surrender, so they accomplished their mission. Or did they? U.S. government officials deny any of this ever happened, and are adamant that such a system does not exist. Former Navy Weapons Research Director Charles Bernard was asked about it.
I have yet to see one of these ray gun things that actually works. And DARPA has come to us every few years to see if there are ways to incapacitate the central nervous system remotely, but nothing has ever come of it. That's too science fiction and far-fetched.
Okay, so it's just a conspiracy theory. The CIA did not use FM radio to transmit subliminal messages. That's the official position. But here's something strange. A ceasefire agreement was reached that allowed Saddam Hussein to remain in power. This brought a lot of criticism of the Bush administration, but the purpose of the war was to free Kuwait, not overthrow the Iraqi government.
Our goal is not the conquest of Iraq. It is the liberation of Kuwait. It is my hope that somehow the Iraqi people can, even now, convince their dictator that he must lay down his arms.
But on March 1st, 1991, one day after the ceasefire, a revolt against Saddam Hussein's government broke out in Basra. The rebellion spread to every major city in southern Iraq. Up to 100,000 Iraqis were killed. A no-fly zone was established. So what caused this sudden rebellion? A radio broadcast called The Voice of Free Iraq encouraged the revolt. That radio station was in a small town in Saudi Arabia and operated by the CIA. Most say this is just a coincidence, that no subliminal weapons exist. Maybe, but there are others who believe that not only does this subliminal technology exist, it was deployed in Iraq for a specific purpose. It was a test run for something bigger. The following year, a facility was built in Fairbanks, Alaska. The project was run by DARPA and had a huge budget. The Department of Defense built a high-powered transmitter that could send electromagnetic pulses into the ionosphere and anywhere in the world. It's called HARP. But that's a different episode. By spreading the idea of non-human biologics with advanced technology, the elites behind Project Bluebeam are creating a narrative that will feel completely logical once the attack happens. Manas's theory goes on. The invasion will begin with staged UFO sightings over major cities, causing mass panic. Governments around the world will issue warnings of an impending global catastrophe. They'll ask permission for something unthinkable and will say yes. Nuclear weapons will be deployed in a desperate battle for survival against alien forces. Can you imagine what it would be like if the skies were full of UFOs, fighter jets, and nuclear explosions? I mean, really think about it. That would be so terrifying that people would gladly give up freedom in exchange for survival. So the nations of the world will unite into a central one-world government. It's the only way to protect humanity from further alien incursions. The false flag invasion will unite humanity. But more than that, it will change our entire worldview. It will redefine what we believe is possible. Now we'll believe anything. The final step of Project Bluebeam seeks to turn that belief into a tool of absolute control. Brains will be wiped. We'll have no memory of what came before this event. This will be done by building upon CIA brainwashing techniques developed and perfected during MKUltra. Then with every mind on Earth a clean slate, the New World Order can begin. Families will be dissolved because you don't know who your family is. You only know the information being transmitted to you by Project Bluebeam, so you go along willingly and peacefully. The Shadow Masters will have boots on the ground ready to go. Men, women, and children around the world will be lined up and inventoried. You might not remember who you are, but they will. They'll know where you live, what you did for a living, who your family is, and most of all, they will know what you own. Cars, homes, money, every asset you have will be accounted for. Your assets will be seized because you don't know what your assets were. And you'll be assigned housing and a job because you don't remember where you lived or what you did. But you won't work for money. You don't need money. Everything you need is provided for you. You feel like this is how life should be. Any other way of life sounds primitive and chaotic. All the wealth in the world belongs to a very select few people. They retain their memories, and they live in luxury. And they know that as long as they keep the population fed, meaning fed food and fed propaganda, people will comply. And anyone who doesn't, they quickly disappear. All homes and businesses will have cameras and microphones. It's illegal to tamper with these. Finding dissenters is easy. You just watch, wait, and act. Within 2 generations, the New World Order will seem perfectly natural. Dissenting wouldn't even make sense. By then, children aren't born to parents. Everyone is sterilized at birth. The Shadow Masters keep tight control on population growth. Children are created by DNA genetically optimized for desirable qualities like submissiveness, agreeability, and lack of curiosity. They are incubated, educated, and assigned a role in society. When they're no longer useful, they're euthanized. This will seem humane. Letting someone live for years sick and old will seem cruel, and that's the cycle. The architects of the New World Order have finally achieved the utopia they've always wanted. Now, Serge Monast has attracted plenty of critics and skeptics. Some people call him a kook. Other people call him a prophet. Unfortunately, we won't know who's right until it's too late.
Forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
So New Order of the Ages isn't just a phrase, it's their ultimate goal. A one-world government, a new world order under their control.
I think the new world order is emerging.
When really a new world order can be created, it's a great opportunity.
The phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
We're in the midst of one of the historic global transformations that is going to eventually lead to a new world order.
Our futures are intrinsically connected to one another, as profound challenges to mankind, such as climate change, are globally interconnected and require collaborative responses. We have to uphold our responsibility, which we have towards the next generation, and which we can only fulfill through collaboration on a national and on a global level. I wish you an impactful and successful meeting.
Our legal system provides equal justice for all. Our federal law enforcement agencies are incorruptible. The FBI's leadership exemplifies honor and integrity and an unwavering deference and respect for the Constitution of these great United States.
Are you being sarcastic?
Of course I'm being sarcastic!